Mankind has predicted, prophesied, and foretold the end times, from the Bible to Rasputin, and from Nostradamus to modern science. All have seen the stupidity of humanity and its path of self-destruction. Today, we are closer than ever before to our ultimate demise. With weapons of mass destruction proliferating the growing powers of the world, we have new and terrifying ways of wiping ourselves out. With modern genetic science, we play God and change nature with consequences we cannot even imagine. With ever more polluting and poisoning industries and commodities, we push the earth to the brink. With overpopulation, we rape and pillage the planet like never before. And now, with science creating biological weapons and the masses huddled together in filthy, live animal marketplaces in countries like China, we are opening up a Pandora's box of epidemiological horror stories. Viruses are almost intelligent. They learn, share information, and mutate. They are but one of many threats to mankind. Humanity is being plagued into the dark abyss of our own making, and it was all predicted many years ago by those who saw the truth. Welcome to our very own self-induced apocalypse. Welcome to the end of mankind. The Black Death was also known as the pestilence, the Great Bubonic Plague, the Great Plague, or the Plague. It was the most devastating pandemic recorded in human history and resulted in deaths of an estimated 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia, peaking in Europe from 1347 to 1351. The bacterium Yersinia pestis, which results in several forms of plague, is believed to have been the cause. The Black Death was the first major European outbreak of plague and the second plague pandemic. It had profound effects on the course of European history. It is believed to have originated in Asia, from where it traveled from the Silk Road, reaching Crimea by 1343. From there, it was most likely carried by fleas living on black rats that traveled on merchant ships, spreading throughout the Mediterranean and reaching the rest of Europe via the Italian peninsula. It is estimated to have killed 30 to 60% of Europe's population and reduced the world population from an estimated 475 million to 350 million in the 14th century. It took 200 years for Europe's population to recover to its previous level, and some regions only recovered by the 19th century. Outbreaks of the plague continue to emerge, but as we know only too well, life-threatening viruses continue to emerge and cause mass panic and change the course of human history. Ever since the end of the Black Death in 1350, the human population has been growing continuously at an alarming rate, and there is no sign of it stopping anytime soon. The biggest increase has been in most recent times, from the 1950s onward, and due largely to medical advancement and the increase in agricultural productivity. The rate of increase has been significant. This itself should tell us something, that this is a modern problem created recently, and we have no precedent, no history to work upon. We don't know exactly what is going to happen. We don't know if a supervirus will come along again as it did in 1918 and kill millions of people. We don't know if we will eat ourselves into mass extinction. We don't know if the destruction of natural species, such as bees, will seal our fate. We don't know if an asteroid will wipe us out or even artificial intelligence. We do know that overpopulation, no matter which way you look at it, is not good. We do know that we are running out of fossil fuels, food supplies, methods of producing more and more power and space. What does the future hold for a planet that is swarming in two-legged locusts, hell-bent on devouring every possible resource the Earth has to offer? In 2016, the British government held a theoretical exercise. It was called Operation Cygnus, and it was intended to discover just how well prepared the country was for a pandemic. The exercise showed that the pandemic would cause the country's health system to collapse from lack of resources, with the chief medical officer at the time stating that a lack of medical ventilators was a serious problem. In 2020, it all came true, and the British were still not prepared. If a wealthy nation with knowledge created from such exercises is still not ready for one of nature's most powerful weapons, then what about the rest of the world? The fact is that there are too many humans on the planet to create a system ready enough to cope. The United Nations has expressed concerns over the huge population growths in places such as Saharan Africa. The present population of planet Earth is heading fast towards 8 billion. Many scientists have produced computer models on just how many humans the planet can cope with under existing conditions. These range from 4 to 16 billion. This means human overpopulation may have already peaked. It doesn't take into account how governments of the globe would cope with a virus that spreads faster and wider than ever before. Whichever model we use, the fact remains that any logical, scientific approach to population reveals a lot of problems, and most are highly concerned. By 2040, it is expected that there will be around 10 billion people. Such numbers are impossible for the human mind to deal with. It is generally accepted that our beautiful planet will simply not be able to cope with the future generations at such huge scales. Rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, global warming, pollution, and the poisoning of our oceans with chemicals and plastics are all being made worse by the rising populations. In addition to this, our hunger for more and more is tearing apart the environment. The supplies of fresh water and food is simply not keeping up with demand, and millions of people are dying of starvation. In poorer countries, standard hygiene is something people in rich countries have the benefit of. Marketplaces where filthy live animals are traded spread contagions. Viruses love to mix and merge. They love to learn from each other, from the DNA of their hosts, and they strive with the power of evolution to survive and grow. They are, in many ways, like humanity, And like humans, they very often kill their host, just as we are killing our planet. Add into the mix military and commercial genetic testing of weapons and drugs using AI technology, and you have a perfect storm. But there are more threats to our future than viruses. Our overuse of fossil fuels means that we simply cannot regenerate sufficient quantities to keep up with demand. We will simply run out. Places such as Great Britain, with a population of 70 million, simply cannot grow enough food or produce enough power to keep the people alive, and so it has to import on massive scales. Imagine what would happen if there were a total lockdown of the world in a pandemic situation or world war. Millions of people would starve. Millions of people would turn on their government and each other. Anarchy on the streets of Britain, and all because of our own stupidity. A stupidity driven by the drive to survive, to breed and breed. The Second World War was a prime example of this, when the island nation had to import food and fight hard to keep open supply routes. Rationing continued for over a decade after the end of the war. Thousands died of starvation. Matters are made even worse by mankind when we consider our political and philosophical ways. Over the course of the last 200 years, we have developed a system called the throwaway society. We overconsume, make cheap throwaway products that harm the environment, and we are voracious. This, in line with overpopulation, makes the future seem very dark without a radical new rethink on the way we all live. And yet, even though we know all of this and have done so for some time, there is little or no action to stop overpopulation. But these concerns are not new. The total inhabitants of planet Earth are estimated to have been around 190 million, or 3% of today's. One of the residents of the city of Carthage was a man named Tertullian. He wrote, "What most frequently meets our view is our teeming population. Our numbers are burdensome to the world, which can hardly support us. Indeed, pestilence and famine and wars and earthquakes have to be regarded as a remedy for nations, as the means of pruning the luxuriance of the human race. In other words, nature will seek to rebalance things. Our own nature helps to keep our population down as well. Diseases from dirt, infant mortality, poor conditions, and wars have all managed to keep the rates low. The population of the planet had remained below 25 million right up until the Industrial Revolution. At the turn of the 19th century, that figure had increased to 1 billion. And intellectuals began predicting that humanity would outgrow the Earth's resources. And yet, businessmen decided that huge population growth was perfect for them because it brought them wealth. Bigger marketplaces, bigger workforces, bigger armies. Better methods of control and manipulation were required and introduced. It is predicted now that population growth will continue unabated into the next century. Adrian Raftery, a University of Washington professor of statistics and sociology, said, "The consensus over the past 20 years or so was that world population, which is currently around 7 billion, would go up to 9 billion and level off or probably decline." we found that there's a 70% probability the world population will not stabilize this century. Population, which had fallen off the world's agenda, remains a very important issue. A recent UN projection suggests the population will grow to as many as 15 billion by 2100. Over a third of Nobel Prize-winning scientists were questioned about their thoughts, and they said that the human overpopulation and environmental degradation are the two greatest threats facing humankind. According to over 15,000 scientists and 184 countries, the rapid human overpopulation of the planet was the primary driver behind ecological and even societal threats. According to the United Nations, the population is increasing by 75 million every year. According to the CIA's figures, it's at least 145 people every minute. By the time you have finished watching this film, another 10,000 people will be inhabiting the planet. Almost all of this growth will take place in the lesser developed world. These underdeveloped countries are home to around 5.5 billion people already. This is expected to increase to around 8 billion by 2050. The remainder of the planet, or the developed part of the world, is expected to remain pretty much as it is now. But there is one place that will not: the United States of America. That is expected to increase by a massive 44%. There are various factors contributing to the growth rate, and it isn't amazingly the birth rate. In fact, in the 1950s, women had an average of 5 children. Nowadays, it's half that rate. What has changed is that we are living longer, and children mortality rates are much lower. One thing these kinds of figures reveals is this: because deaths in the developed regions is expected to outstrip births, the increase in population is actually going to come from immigration. This is one of those unspoken reasons that countries such as Germany allow so many migrants in, because their own populations are declining and getting older. Without migration, the population of most developed countries would actually fall. In 1800, only 3% of the world's population lived in cities. Today, that figure exceeds 50%, meaning that most of the people on planet Earth live in cities, huddled together in mass. When the virus outbreaks come, these become the epicenters of global pandemics. Millions could die. And here is the startling figure. In 1950, there were only 83 cities of populations of over 1 million. Now there are nearly 500. At these rates, urban populations will double every 38 years. 3 out of 5 people alive will be living in a city. Most of this increase is in Asia and Africa, where 1 billion people currently live in shanty towns. Everyone in the field agrees that these places are breeding grounds for majority problems such as poverty, unemployment, drug addiction, crime, disease, and much more. But cities are not staying at 1 million inhabitants. In fact, we now have a classification of megacity, where the population is over 10 million. This includes Seoul, Karachi, Mexico City, Mumbai, São Paulo, London, New York, and Greater Tokyo, which has a population of over 35 million. That's more than the entire population of Canada. By 2025, we will have hyper-cities, or cities with 20 million plus. Places such as Lagos in Nigeria, which only had 300,000 people in 1950, and now has over 20 million. That is a massive increase, and it's happening all over the world. In China, their cities are home to over 800 million people. What we need is to control this. But what really happens from a historical perspective is that we develop new ways of dealing with it. Technology is always boosted by two things: war and population increase. In the past, we went through three major technology revolutions: the tool-making revolution, the agricultural revolution, and the industrial. All three helped mankind overcome the overpopulation crisis by producing more food and goods. It also increased the power of the rich elite and has been doing so for a long time. Today we are undergoing a scientific revolution where genetics, chemicals, and computer science are all being used to change the way we eat and live. All of this will boost the growth rates, not help them decline. A ready supply of food and goods, immunizations, medicine, better sanitation, and environmental conditions all helped population grow and birth rates outstrip death rates. One thing that reduced the birth rates in the developed countries was birth control. Even though many still cling to outdated religious intolerance of birth control, it actually reduced the birth rates. Only the poor countries of the world unable to afford mass birth control did not see a decline. Religions such as the Catholic Church need to have a serious reappraisal of their beliefs in the matter if they truly care for humanity and planet Earth. So overpopulation of planet Earth is a fact, and it's only going to get worse. All of this has been agreed upon by scientists around the world. So what problems are going to arise because of it? First, it will cause health issues. As we have seen, the populations of the planet are increasingly moving close and closer to each other in mega and hyper cities. This increases the chance of spreading infectious diseases and epidemics. Virologists are already warning of virus X, saying we are due for a major catastrophe along the lines of bird flu or worse. In addition to this, the overuse of antibiotics has made them virtually useless. In 2020, we saw the outbreak of COVID-19. It spread from China across the entire planet and killed as it spread. The whole world went into lockdown, and a major financial catastrophe was started as countries scrambled to save their economies from collapse. There was no vaccine, no cure, and so the world endured isolation for months. These viruses mutate at alarming rates. It's almost as if they have their own collective intelligence. Soon, a coronavirus or similar will mutate that we can't stop. Health issues are made even worse by the conditions the masses live in and unhygienic surroundings. Filth builds faster in areas of overpopulation. It accumulates at a faster and faster rate, causing more disease. The way that some nations treat their animals doesn't help. Bringing live animals to the marketplace brings disease. This is what happened in China in 2020. Because of the close proximity of people, when disease does break out, it is spread more easily on public transport and places such as hotels, parks, and airports. We are not the first humans to have witnessed a pandemic, and we will not be the last. There have been many who have predicted such things, from Rasputin to Nostradamus, and even the Bible. In Luke chapter 21, Jesus spoke about the signs that would precede the end of the world. Jesus said that one of those signs would be pestilences, and there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences, and there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. The meaning of a pestilence, according to the Hebrew and Greek definitions, is a plague or disease. In Matthew 24, Jesus said, For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all of these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. In several versions of the Bible, the word pestilences appears between famines and earthquakes. He explained that just as a woman's contractions or labor pains get more frequent and severe as a baby is nearing birth, so these events or signs will also become more frequent and severe as the world nears the second coming of Jesus or end of mankind. Very similar predictions or prophecies have been spoken of by mystics and seers throughout the ages, from Mother Shipton to Nostradamus to Rasputin. These people saw one thing, and it wasn't the future. They saw patterns. Whatever we believe in, the fact remains that humanity repeats cycles over and over again. An observation of actions and reactions, both within humanity and from nature itself, gives clear signs that something will always come along to take down our civilizations. The problem today is this: there are now many more people in the world, and we are further away from nature. We live on the just-in-time principle through our goods and foods. So when a supermarket can no longer get bread or milk, then thousands starve because there are no stocks. In 2020, mass panic buying saw the world run out of food, hand sanitizers, and believe it or not, toilet rolls. Another major problem looming on the horizon is unemployment. This is already at huge levels in many parts of the overpopulated world, but it is set to get even bigger with the introduction of artificial intelligence, which is predicted to take up to or more than half of the world's jobs. No one has a solution to this problem, and yet they proceed at an alarming rate. Unemployment spreads poverty like a plague. Most of the overpopulated world is simply not wealthy enough to cope with the problems. Unrest rises, lawlessness, and wars erupt and spread. Mass migrations occur and pass the unrest, disease and poverty around. The rich say, "Not in my backyard," and push back. The masses are fed propaganda and become protectionist and nationalist. This is happening right now in many parts of the world. Poverty is mostly a state of inability to make financial movements in between people. But still, countries of the high population generally have many people in the line of poverty than those countries with less population. This can easily be seen in the current trends where people from certain countries are richest in the world, yet their countries have a number of poor people. So it will be like rich and poor stay side by side. And because the most overpopulated places in the world are the poorest, the education systems are also poor. Poorly educated people make bad decisions about life and often live miserable lives. And their uneducated ways means diseases can spread to the rest of us, as it did with COVID-19. Lack of education causes problems for the rest of us because the environment is affected by those who do not understand sustainability. The bigger the population, the bigger the need to rape and pillage the planet. The bigger the waste and filth and disease, and the cycle gets worse. Running out of groundwater, land for crops, in addition to deforestation and higher pollution, are all happening right now at alarming rates. There simply is not enough fresh water for drinking, in addition to sewage treatment, and so filth spreads. Richer countries such as Saudi Arabia use technology to reclaim water from the waste and seawater, but poorer countries cannot. Overpopulation means increased air and water pollution, contamination of the soil we need for crops, billions of tons of plastic entering the water system, desertification and deforestation, and so much more. All of this causes wildfires, global warming, animal, plant, and insect extinctions, pandemics, and so much more. Biodiversity on planet Earth is reducing at the same time as the human population is increasing. There is a direct correlation. Sir David King, former chief scientific advisor to the UK government, told a parliamentary inquiry, "It is self-evident that the massive growth in the human population through the 20th century has had more impact on biodiversity than any other single factor. The intensive farming required to feed so many people actually results in the evolution and spread of antibiotic-resistant diseases, water and air pollution, and new viruses that affect us. We then have to find new methods of fighting these problems and cause even more problems. As every day passes, the chances of there emerging a major killer virus gets higher, and it is the poor living in overcrowded areas that will suffer the most. If they don't die of the disease, they will die of starvation, thirst, and poor diets. Indeed, the countries with the fastest growth rates are those with the lowest life expectancy. Poverty, crime, drugs, disease, pollution, infant mortality, conflict, lawlessness, and more are just a few of the results of humanity's insanity of overpopulating the planet. What is the point of continuing with human birth rates if all we are doing in the majority of the world is causing suffering? As human overpopulation drives resources and basic necessities, such as food and water, to become scarcer, there will be increased competitiveness for resources, which leads to elevated crime rates due to drug cartels and theft by people in order to survive. According to the Center for Biological Diversity, the largest single threat to the ecology and biodiversity of the planet in the decades to come will be global climate disruption due to the buildup of human-generated greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We not only need smaller footprints, but fewer feet. Every National Academy of Science of every major country in the world agrees. Every professional scientific society in every field related to the field of climate endorses it. 98% of all scientists that are most active in publishing in the field of climate science agree with it. The consensus is unequivocal. Human activities are causing climate change. The effects of climate change are profound and far-reaching. Learning the hard way that we can't separate the economy from the ecological systems that support it. Climate change, perhaps the greatest challenge and threat humanity has ever faced, has been left largely unchecked by world leaders to continue unabated, threatening the basis of civilization itself. Human overpopulation is a major driving force behind the loss of ecosystems, such as rainforest, coral reefs, wetlands, and Arctic ice. Rainforests once covered 14% of the Earth's land surface. Now they cover a bare 6%, and experts estimate that the last remaining rainforests could be consumed in less than 40 years, and certainly by the end of the century at the current rate of deforestation. Due mainly to warmer temperatures, acidifying oceans, and pollution, Close to 30% of the ocean's reefs have already vanished since 1980, including half of the reefs in the Caribbean and 90% of the Philippines' coral reefs. And scientists forecast that Australia's Great Barrier Reef may be dead by the year 2050, and all the coral reefs could be gone by the end of the century. Furthermore, the area of permanent ice cover is now declining at a rate of 11.5% per decade. If this trend continues, summers in the Arctic could be ice-free in the next 30 years. Wetlands are increasingly under threat in the United States, but also all over the world. In the U.S., less than half of original wetlands remain, with 53% being lost, which is about 140 million acres. In Europe, between 60 and 70% of wetlands have been completely destroyed. As human populations continue to grow, so will our footprint on the interconnected ecological infrastructure of life. Human beings are currently causing the greatest mass extinction of species since the extinction of dinosaurs 65 million years ago, at rates at 1,000 to 10,000 faster than normal. The 2012 update of the Red List of Threatened Species shows that of the 63,837 species examined worldwide, nearly a third of the total are at a threat of extinction. If present trends continue, scientists warn that within a few decades, at least half of all plant and animal species on Earth will be extinct as a result of climate change, habitat loss, pollution, acidifying oceans, invasive species, overexploitation of natural resources, overfishing, poaching, and human overpopulation. We are now losing 30,000 species per year, or 3 species per hour, which is faster than new species can evolve. If this trend continues, then humanity itself is at risk. Hunger and malnutrition kill nearly 6 million children a year, and more people are malnourished in sub-Saharan Africa this decade than in the 1990s. In sub-Saharan Africa, the number of malnourished people grew to 203.5 million people. And yet China, the world's most populous country, suffers from an obesity surge. Around 200 million people are thought to be overweight, or 22.8% of the population, and 60 million are obese. 1 in 3 people in the UK are now overweight, and similar stories can be found in the US and Europe. Overpopulation has without doubt adversely impacted the environment of Earth, starting at least as early as the 20th century. According to the Global Footprint Network, today humanity uses the equivalent of 1.5 planets to provide the resources we use and absorb or waste. The fact is, in the United States alone, humans consume 30% more of the world's resources than is sustainable. Year in and year out, mankind is eating his own marrow. In fact, it is not just the good old US of A that is over-harvesting the planet. 85 other countries in the world are doing the same. And because they don't have enough in their own countries for the desires of their people, they rape and pillage others. African nations, which do not over-harvest but desire all the trappings of the West, sell their natural resources on the cheap to America, China, Russia, and Europe. Hundreds of men die each year digging little shiny rocks out of the ground for rich slobs in the so-called civilized world to dangle from their earlobes. We actually have no idea what we are doing, and most don't care. even with statistics, we are like blind lemmings, still willing to jump off the cliff. The truth, however, is scary. Mankind produces waste at such scales that it's almost impossible to comprehend. Every day we throw out enough waste to fill 12 of the world's largest container ships. That's nearly 4,500 container ships in just 1 year. It equates to about 1,500 million tons of waste every year. And it's not just the waste we throw out. For every bag of waste you throw in the trash can, there have in fact already been 70 bags of waste just in the manufacturing of your goods. Every one bag equals 70 bags of waste. But that is the tip of the iceberg, because those statistics were just for the United Kingdom, a small island nation. The world's statistics are actually unbelievable. Every year, the world dumps a massive 6 billion tons of waste. If all this waste was put on trucks, they would stretch around the world 64 times. By 2100, these figures will triple, and these figures are in no way accurate. They are well under the real unreported truth. Apart from packaging waste generated from luxury items and their manufacture, the most startling waste crime in the world today is that of food. When we consider the starving of the world, it is tantamount to mass murder. While so many obese people eat enough food every day for an entire family, starvation affects nearly 1 billion in the world. And it is not because we don't have enough food. It is because we waste so much. Global food supplies far outweighs global demand. There is enough to feed everyone, but we don't because we are greedy. If not murder, then it is manslaughter, because we know about the problem and do nothing. In a throwaway world where waste does not matter to us, it seems we are more than happy to throw away humans too. Nearly 1 billion people in the world attempt to live on less than $2 per day. The figure has in fact improved over the past 30 years as Western consumer capitalist systems have been adopted. 98% of those in hunger live in developing countries, 553 million in the Asian and Pacific regions, 47 million in Latin America and the Caribbean, and 227 million in Africa. Every year, nearly 10 million people die of hunger. That's more than AIDS, TB, and malaria combined. Because of the patriarchal societies these people live in, 60% of those that die are women. And because of that, 3.1 million children die every year of malnutrition. And yet, even with these statistics, the rest of the world carries on throwing away half their food. Our throwaway society affects much more than just humans. Apart from the fact that we destroy our wildlife on a massive scale and poison the bees, we actually grow and kill more animals than we need to. And because we waste so much, the fact is that we as a species are causing suffering of innocent animals on a massive scale. The production of meat is actually very inefficient. It takes 70 times more energy to produce meat than corn, leaving a massive energy footprint affecting the environment. It also takes up a lot of space. We need an area 7 times the size of Europe to produce food for the cattle that feeds the people of Europe. If we ate crops instead of meat, it would actually change the world. To feed crops to 20 people, we need 1 hectare of land. The same land would feed enough livestock to eventually feed 1 or 2 people. Here's the frightening statistic. By 2050, there will be less than 0.1 hectare of land per person on this planet. Not enough on current feeding methods to feed us all. If we don't change our ways soon, we will be facing major catastrophe. As for the burning of fossil fuels, the statistics are simple. To produce 1 calorie of protein from corn or soybean, it takes 2 or 3 calories of fossil fuel. For the same amount of beef, we need 54 calories of fuel. Meat therefore takes more land and energy, costing us and the environment more than the planet can afford. In addition to this, while 1 billion people starve, half of the world's crops are fed to animals so that we can enjoy our burgers. And yet, even after we have gone to the amazing lengths to rear animals and slaughter them, we throw half of them away uneaten. It is a crime against nature and common sense. It will be the end of us. Our waste creates more trouble for us in other ways. We throw away our consumer goods without care in the world, and then we suffer the consequences of rodents and insects, which harbor gastrointestinal parasites, worms, yellow fever, and a host of other plagues waiting to come and teach us a lesson. When we burn those huge piles of waste, we release millions of tons of toxins into the environment, which we then breathe in and wonder why we get cancer. Toxic chemicals from our waste seep into the groundwater, soil, and river systems. We then drink it, use it for meat production, and water our crops. In the air and in the water, our waste screws the ecosystem. This is not just a thing we read about. This is the environment we raise our children in. When we treat our waste, we actually create greenhouse gas emissions, such as methane. This then contributes to global warming, and soon we are complaining that our fields are flooded or there's no rain for the crops. Either way we look at waste, we are seriously screwing ourselves. We also like to dump our waste in areas predominantly lived by our starving brothers and sisters. We have even given it a cute little name, NIMBY. It means not in my backyard, and we really do mean it. After all, we have the money and brains to be able to shit on our fellow man, don't we? The funny thing about this dumping of waste in our poor neighbors is that we are actually making things even worse because the energy footprint created to move billions of tons of waste every year comes back and slaps us in the face when global warming decides to flood our green and pleasant land. And it is not just a sad and sorry state we are creating for the world. We are creating sad people too. What do you think happens to a person's mind when he or she cannot attain the perfect lifestyle with the luxuries of the celebs? Suicide rates are huge in the West, where we apparently have all this wealth. It is sad. It is also very sad that we identify ourselves with these new consumer products. Are you a PC or Mac person? You a Coke or Pepsi man? We actually state these things with pride because of the power of propaganda. We state it because we wish to be associated with the image that the brand has created. To drink Coke is to be all-American, isn't it? To be a Mac user is to be wealthy, cool, and artistic, isn't it? These are building blocks of our own identity. These are images we wish to portray to the world as images of our own identity. It has always been this way. It is nothing new, but it is used by clever marketing techniques to get us to consume, to buy more and more junk that we then send down to the landfill site to destroy the planet just a little more. Mankind is so brainwashed and so overwhelmed with information that he no longer realizes how far he has come away from the natural habitat he lived in for millennia. He can no longer see the difference between information, entertainment, and blatant propaganda. The money behind the media of the world comes from consumerism. It thrives upon it and is paid by it. News does not come free. It has to be paid for. Entertainment is not sent from the gods. It needs a wage packet. Shopping is a social experience, a day out in Wonderland. Online shopping is easy and addictive. With plastic card in hand, we venture into the safety of the store and emerge like hunters with our prey in shiny plastic bags emblazoned with social status symbols. And then we throw them all away in the trash. We are not all evil, and many of us recognize the need to do something urgent. The problem is that mankind is greedy, and that overrides the need to protect the planet for the future or feed his brothers and sisters. What is happening, and which is encouraging, is the fact that waste is such a big business now. This means that the disposal of waste is actually turning into recycling of waste and even reuse. It is known as resource recovery because it has been recognized that waste is in fact a resource. Many scientists around the globe are searching out ways of using waste for its next specific purpose, rather than how to hide it away for a future generation to worry about. Recyclable materials are extracted and recycled. Non-recyclable waste is burned and the energy extracted for electricity production. Various methods are used, including gasification and anaerobic digestion. They call it waste to energy. There is hope on the horizon in other ways too. Meat has successfully been grown in the lab. Fake meat that tastes like the real thing. No animals suffering. Less pollution and energy footprint, and more land to grow crops. A fashionable surge in the world of retro goods has created a new industry of recycling old stuff. Antiques and knickknacks are cleaned up and suddenly become cool. Plastic goods from the 80s are now the latest must-have. Recycling solar and wind energy, sustainable farming, and more are all becoming more and more popular. Around the world, the capitalists are recognizing the need to be in on the ground with these cutting-edge technologies, not to save the world, but to turn a profit. And if that is what it takes, then so be it. Our job as consumers is to consume less and apply pressure upon those in power by selectively buying those products that are environmentally sustainable. If the small man speaks en masse, then the big man will listen. Use your voice and stand up in defense of our planet for the sake of your children. And our voice needs to be raised to say things that may feel wrong. That allowing humanity to continue to grow at this rate is bad for the planet and us. That there is little point in giving birth to children that will know nothing but suffering. H.G. Wells, the great science fiction writer, was asked by the United Nations to research population and its problems. He was a brave man who made the observation that population needed to be controlled. He was hated for what he said, and yet he was correct in his statements. When rabbits were introduced into Australia by the British, it caused a huge problem. There were no predators to keep the rabbit population down, and they bred, well, like rabbits. They devastated crops and spread disease among the existing species. They are an analogy of what humanity is doing to the planet. We have no predators but each other. We breed and breed. We spread out of control and destroy other species at an alarming rate. Our answer to the rabbit problem was genocide. we introduced a highly infectious and deadly disease into the rabbit population called myxomatosis. One day in a dystopian future, mankind, nature, or indeed artificial intelligence will make a decision about the overpopulation of the earth by humanity, and it may not be one we will all like. Is it not therefore better to control the levels of births as opposed to increasing the level of deaths? Not all decisions in life are easy, and we are living through a period when the most difficult of questions has to be asked. Is it not time to force control for the sake of ourselves and all life on the planet? One day, Virus X will come out of nowhere, and it will be of our own making. Whether we create it in a laboratory or it arises because of our evil ways to those innocent animals we so easily call livestock. They are not stock. They are living sentient beings with emotions. The coronavirus pandemic of 2020 is a massive wake-up call for us all. It came out of nowhere and spread across the globe rapidly and left human bodies piled up as it went. We know it as coronavirus or COVID-19. It is a severe acute respiratory syndrome, first identified in December 2019 in Wuhan, China. It quickly broke out and spread across the entire globe, even though the Chinese authorities went to unprecedented levels to quarantine the area. The symptoms are fever, coughing, and shortness of breath, as well as fatigue, muscle pain, sore throats, diarrhea, abdominal pain, and loss of smell and taste. The alarming thing about the disease is that a large proportion of those infected are asymptomatic, meaning they show no signs of having the disease, and therefore spread it further afield. It can take anything up to 14 days before symptoms do appear, and this also helps it to spread further. The majority of cases were what we called mild, but this also helped to spread because people didn't even realize they had it. Some, however, especially in the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions, go on to progress into viral pneumonia with multiple organ failure and die. The small droplets spread when those infected cough, sneeze, breathe, or even talk, land on surfaces and are inhaled. They are an invisible killer that can live on surfaces for 72 hours, awaiting the latest victim. Almost the entire world went into lockdown to force people to socially distance themselves. Business was essentially crippled and stock markets crashed. Life was changed in an incredible short space of time by a minute invisible mass killer. Millions went out in panic, bought food, hand sanitizers, and even toilet rolls. Viruses are living organisms that strive to survive. It is not in their interest to kill everyone. Indeed, it is almost intelligent, and some scientists believe there is a collective intelligence at a subatomic level. They keep the fit alive to spread further afield and kill the sick and elderly. Killing everyone would be self-defeating to the virus itself. But these organisms love to adapt, and when they come into contact with other viruses, such as those that do have extremely high death rates, then they adapt and change into a rapidly spreading super killer. The COVID-19 pandemic is a wake-up call for humanity. This virulent and deadly virus is now unleashed. It will merge and morph. It will adapt and change. And one day it may meet up with a deadly ally, such as Ebola, and then we are all screwed. What COVID-19 does show us is this: we, even now in the 21st century, are extremely weak and vulnerable on many levels. Without antibodies, we have no immune system capable of fighting the virus, and the weak die. Because vaccines take years to create, then we have nothing to fight it with. And while we are scrambling around attempting to make vaccines, the virus is adapting, just like influenza does every year. It is a constant battle to stay one step ahead, and COVID-19 shows us that we do not always win. On another level, it revealed how weak our financial systems really are. Panic sets off more panic, and pretty soon billions have been lost overnight. Inflation rates soar, and the poorest of the world suffer on a massive scale. Prices rise, millions lose their jobs, loans are unpaid, banks run out of money, and deep depression sets in. More and more people start to fall into the poverty trap, and suicides increase. We are a crazy species, out of control, running rapidly towards our own self-destruction. War, overpopulation, weapons of mass destruction, poverty, global warming, and ultimately disease are building daily to bring natural balance back into the world and eradicate the greatest threat the earth has ever seen: humanity. In the Bible, there is a book called Revelation. It talks about end times. This book was written in a different age when people believed in deities. But the message was very clear, and it is a lesson we must all learn. In the book, there are 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Each horseman has a seal with a message for mankind before the second coming of Jesus, when all humans will be taken away. Together, these legendary horsemen are prophesied to kill with sword or warfare, with hunger or famine, with death, pestilence, and disease, and by the beasts of the earth. 25% of mankind will be slain, or nearly 2 billion people. These scribes of 2,000 years ago understood one thing: the nature of man. They knew we would repeat our mistakes again and again. It is inbuilt. The apocalypse, or the end of mankind, will be caused by mankind.